couple weeks ago, I was talking about earworms, not like a medical diagnosis again, but the feeling you get when you get a song stuck in your head. And somebody mentioned something about U2 last week. I won't mention names, Jason. And my poor wife had to put up with me singing the same song all week long. You've probably heard it. I have climbed the highest mountains. I have run through the fields only to be with you. What's the next line? No, that I have run, I have crawled. What? I have scaled these city walls. Yeah, and then it ends, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Okay, that was not good. I'm glad we did it that way, though, because the copyright cops might flag us. So we messed up the words. It was our own interpretation. We won't get in trouble. But the lyrics of this word have often been called a deep expression of spiritual longing. And the title of it actually comes, or the lyrics for it are supposedly based off a Bob Dylan song. When Dylan wrote, "You'll find out when you reach the top. When you reach the top, you are at the bottom." Which is how it seems to go, that you think you're at the top, whatever that means. You're at the top of the game, top of the charts, top of your company or your section of the company you work in. You're on top of the world, but have you found what you're looking for? Have you found what you're looking for? Our story today is about the happenings, as Amber was saying, of these three young men who lived 2.5 millennia ago, and it seems like they found what they were looking for because they were willing to give everything up for it. Are you just running laps? Okay. This story comes from the Old Testament, from the book of Daniel, and it's the entire chapter, chapter 3. And these events occurred in the ancient city of Babylon, which is located in modern-day Iraq now. And the ancient city of Babylon was built on the site of an even more ancient city of Babel, which was the place where they tried to build a tower up as high as they could go by people who still had not found what they were looking for. And centuries later, after the tower crumbled, the king who restored the city to its former greatness was a man named Nebuchadnezzar. He was a military general who had become the ruler of a great empire that he led from his capital city of Babylon. And people who visited Babylon in Nebuchadnezzar's day marveled at what he had made of it, with its hanging gardens and its city walls that were said to be as thick as tennis courts are long and as high as the Statue of Liberty's torch. Babylon was a marvel in the ancient world, and this is where the story of these three young people unfolds. These three young men who were born in the land of Judea, these Jewish men, their birth names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But as they were taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar's army and brought to Babylon to serve him, there in Babylon, they were given different names. Their birth names were given to them to honor the God of Israel, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. But they were given Babylonian names to honor the Babylonian gods, to show they belonged to Babylon. So Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah became Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They did well in Babylon to the point where they were even promoted to prominent positions in the Babylonian government. But for them, it's not what they were looking for. And this is their story. Daniel chapter 3. Now Nebuchadnezzar built a statue 9 feet wide and 90 feet high. And just for comparison's sake, this is about, if you were driving down 45, you know the big statue of Sam Houston. I think on Wednesday we said it's about 67 feet high. So it's even bigger than that. And this was set up in the niche of the wall of the city in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar summoned all the senators, the prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, provincial officials, all of them to come to the dedication of the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Now this reading, this writer really likes to repeat, so I'm not going to keep saying that. I'm just going to say officials, because it says those court names a bunch. We're just going to say officials. So the officials assembled for the dedication of the statue, and they stood before the statue King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "To you, O peoples, nations, men of every language, It is said when you hear the sound of the horns, the flutes, the harps, the strings, the drums, and all kinds of music. Again, that's going to be repeated a lot. We're just going to say musical instruments. Is that what your message said on Wednesday? Oh, big band. Okay, we'll just say the big bands. Thank you. When you hear the big band, you will fall down and worship the statue of gold King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Anyone who does not bow down and worship will immediately be thrown into a flaming furnace of fire. So all the peoples, when they heard the big band, they bowed down and worshipped the statue of gold King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. At that time, some Babylonian men came forward to accuse men of Judea. Your Majesty, may you live forever. You yourself have given a decree that anyone who hears the sound of the big band must bow down and worship this statue of gold that you have set up. And anyone who does not bow down and worship will immediately be thrown into the flaming, fiery furnace. Now there are some men from Judea whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your Majesty. Your gods they do not serve. The statue of gold that you have set up they do not worship. Then Nebuchadnezzar, filled with rage, summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they stood before him and said to them, "Is it true, my gods, you do not serve? And the statue of gold that I set up you do not worship? Now when you hear the sound of the big band, if you're ready to bow down and worship the statue I made, very good. But if you will not, immediately you will be thrown into the blazing, fiery furnace. Then what God will be able to save you from my hand?" And they answered the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the flaming furnace of fire, the God whom we serve is able to save us. But even if God does not, we want you to know, your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods and we will not worship the image of gold that you set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar, furious with rage, his expression changed. The image of his face changed towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And he commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual, and ordered the strongest men of his army to bind them up and throw them into the blazing, fiery furnace. So these 3 men, still wearing their robes, their turbans, their trousers, and other clothing, were bound up to be thrown into the fiery furnace. And the king's command was so urgent, the furnace was so excessively hot that the men who carried them up were killed by the flames. And so these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing, fiery furnace. And King Nebuchadnezzar was startled, and he stood up and he said to his advisors, "Didn't we throw 3 men into the fire tied up?" And they said, "Certainly, your Majesty." And he said, But I see 4 men walking around, unbound, unharmed, and one of them looks like a son of the gods." Then Nebuchadnezzar approached the opening of the furnace, and he shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come here. Come out." And they came out of the furnace, and all the royal officials gathered around them, and they saw that the fire had no power over their bodies. The hairs of their head were not singed, the clothing was not charred, there was not even the smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his messenger and saved his servants who trusted in him." And he changed the king's command. They were willing to give up their lives rather than to serve the only God except their own God. Therefore I decree that any people of any nation or language who says anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be cut into pieces and their houses turned into piles of rubble, because no God is able to save in this way. And Nebuchadnezzar promoted them in the province of Babylon. This is the good news, the word of the Lord. Thanks. That might be the longest reading I've ever done in worship outside of Good Friday. That one's pretty long too. But I thought it was important to hear the whole story from start to finish, because I don't know that I've ever been faced with the kind of choice that they were faced with, at least under the kind of pressure to choose between either keeping my faith in God or keeping hold of my fleeting, frail, mortal life. Or maybe I have. Maybe all of us have, in a smaller, less dramatic, more subtle way, that we've all been asked to testify, to give witness to what it is we're looking for. Our words and actions, our silence and inaction, our lives send a message to those around us. Whether we're doing it consciously or not, we are always sending messages to the people who are watching. This is what I value, and this is what I am looking for. And sometimes people don't give a clear witness. They say, this is what I value, but their actions say otherwise. And so what do you pay more attention to what is said or to what is done? And if what they say doesn't match with what they do, and what they do doesn't match with what they say, then what does that say about their witness? I would argue they're probably unreliable. If their words and actions don't line up, they're probably not a reliable witness. They're not going to help you find what it is you are looking for. Every one of us is a witness for something or someone, and sometimes you find a truly reliable witness. And in the Christian tradition, we call them martyrs. Now, you might have heard of a martyr as someone who gives up their life for their faith, and yes, that's part of it. That's part of what a martyr is. But it's more about giving a witness. Martyr comes from the Greek word which means witness, and you get a really clear witness when someone is forced to make a choice. You can either stand with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or bow to something else. And the martyr knows, if I choose this mortal life over the God who gives true life, I still won't find what I'm looking for. It'll be warm for a night, but it'll leave me cold as a stone. And the martyr prays, but Lord, if I suffer the loss of all things for you, if I lose myself for you, I will be found in you, to be known by you and be loved by you, only to be with you. A Christian shouldn't have it as a goal to die for their faith. We're not trying to make ourselves become martyrs, but we do need one. We need a witness who can show us what we all have been looking for. We need one who has climbed the mountain, who has run through the field, who scaled the wall and walked in the fire with us. We need Jesus, the Son of God, born in the land of Judea. In the book of Revelation, Jesus is called the faithful and true witness. He is the witness, he is the martyr, the one who will bring you through the fire, and it will have no power over your body. Not even the smell of it will be on you, and he will bring you into the kingdom where all the colors bleed into one. You're going to have you two stuck in your head for the rest of the day. But Jesus is the one that you've been looking for. This song, as I said, has often been referred to as an expression of spiritual longing. And the guitarist of the band went so far as to call it gospel, that this song is gospel. In an interview, he said, it might not seem like gospel, but if you really look deep at the lyrics, this certainly is good news. And so as we continue this journey through Lent, this journey to the cross, these words are more relevant for us than ever. That if you listen to Jesus, the faithful witness, you will hear him say, I broke the bonds, I loosed the chains, I carried the cross of your shame, only to be with you. Amen.